Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Elam with A Voice for Men, and today I have had the good fortune to get in contact with Justin Trottier of the Canadian Association for Equality. Justin is an advocate that has been working long and hard for quite some time for the benefit of men and boys dealing in specialty areas of things that are particularly applicable to their lives, especially when they're in trouble. Welcome, Justin. Very glad to have you here.
I am very glad to be joining you.
We're going to be talking quite a bit about, I think at some point, I think somebody may come up with the term Billboard gate before this is over with, but let's hope it doesn't go that far. Cafe sponsored and put up a billboard recently pointing out that statistically, and according to all the evidence that we have, which has been pointing, by the way, to gender symmetry in intimate partner violence for a long, long time now. The old model of male-only violence has been pretty thoroughly debunked. Cafe put up a poster, not a poster, but a billboard, and the reaction has been somewhat hostile from a lot of groups, but there's also another side of the reaction that we want to get into first. But let me first, Justin, if you don't mind, I want to let the viewers take a look at this billboard.
Yes.
So they can see exactly what we're talking about. And this is it right here. This is the billboard that Cafe put up that says half of, I have to read this backwards, half of domestic violence. Yes, if you would, please.
Sure, and I'm glad you're showing it because a lot of people have asked what is so controversial about this, and maybe your viewers can ask themselves that question. So here's what it says: half of domestic violence victims are men. No domestic violence shelters are dedicated to us. Hashtag Let's Talk Men, and then there's a plug with our website and a call to donors to support the campaign. And the image is, I guess, the most provocative part. You have a woman who is lording it over a man. Her hands are over his head. He is cowering in fear. His hands are sort of in a protective gesture. He is clearly being threatened by this hostile woman.
Okay, very good. So now that everybody's had a chance to see that, I can put my regular lower third on, so that won't dominate the scene for this discussion. But let me ask first, we're going to get in, there has been a multifaceted response to this event. I've seen accounts in the media. I have seen some gender ideologue accounts that are claiming this is about taking away resources from women and the old abusers lobby stuff. I've seen a lot of men's advocates that are lauding it. I'm one of them. But the effects are not just limited to the group of people interested in these issues. And one of the things you brought up just a moment before we started talking was that it actually has inspired some other men to step up and start speaking out about what's happening to them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. You ask me, how do you respond to all of this negativity? Isn't it overwhelming? Is certainly one story, is that people are shocked. What I find shocking, I should say, is how shocked they are, because the statistics have been there for a long time. Statistics Canada, which is the primary survey from where we're pulling this data, on a regular basis when they do these household surveys, people have known, those who have looked anyway, have known for a long time that the rates were roughly comparable between male and female victims. So it is surprising and shocking that people are so surprised and shocked by the data, and that accounts, I think, for some of the hostility. But what I am more concerned is having the desired effect, which is to get men help, to get victims who are slipping through the cracks because they don't conform to the stereotype of what is supposed to speak up in some cases for the first time ever about being survivors of victimization, and to get them help. And I can tell you we have had dozens and dozens and dozens of men, as well as some women, who have witnessed abuse against their male loved ones, who have contacted us, have come into our facility, the new Canadian Centre for Men and Families here in Toronto, and are for the first time willing to step up and get the help that they need. And I think that is a real success story.
It is indeed. Let me ask you, are you not speaking to us right now directly from the new Center for Men and Families that Cafe
That's
established?
correct.
Um,
Absolutely.
that's a whole other story by itself. I mean, this was I think, a watershed moment to establish this kind of organization. Um, how does it play in? Is this billboard, was it designed to inspire maybe male victims who had been silent before to contact the center for help?
Yes, absolutely. We have opened the center just in November of last year, so it's only been open for about 4 or 5 months now. And a lot of our focus had been on getting our programs started, and now that they have launched, we now want to let men and women know that the programs exist. And so the timing has been optimal. The Billboard campaign, and it's a campaign in the sense that there will be multiple billboards. They will talk about a broad range of men's issues, men's health, and other issues to do with men's well-being, and they will all connect to programs and services that are being offered or which we're developing for men and their families here at the center. And every billboard will encourage men to seek out the support that we can offer, or if we can't offer it, to use us as a hub, as a source of referrals, as a one-stop shop, if you will, for men to get the help that they need.
Excellent. Let me ask you more about that. I know that we had signed on to talk about the billboard, and I want to talk a lot more about that. But while we have you here, and since the center is relatively new and such a landmark effort, I mean, it's my eyebrows are still raised over it. What is it the center is intending to provide specifically? What programs do you have in place? What programs do you hope it to have in place in the future as funding and public support becomes more available to you?
Yes, so specifically, we offer men's health programs. So we have therapy right now. We have a meditation program geared for men. We are about to launch a peer support program. So by the end of the month, we will have weekly peer support sessions for men who are going through different kinds of hardships. It might be abuse or trauma. It might be family breakup. It might be loss of employment. There's all sorts of things that our community has reached out to us in need of. So this peer support program will be geared around those needs. And then most exciting, I think, because it actually touches on the #1 need that we're getting, is a legal aid clinic. We will be offering Toronto's first legal aid clinic geared at men and the legal needs that are unique to men. So you can imagine what those might be: things like family law, things like false allegations of domestic abuse, which we've been hearing a lot about in the last couple of weeks, and other aspects of the law. So the peer support and the legal aid programs will be active within 2 weeks. They will be geared to start in April. We've already got a series of therapy and mental health programs that have already been active since November.
Let me ask you this. Now, there is at least a stereotype, and I'm probably one of the ones that holds it, and it holds up with my clinical experience and certainly in dealing with a lot of men. There is a great deal of difficulty for a lot of men to step forward and say, I need help. It's sometimes very, very hard to get them to take that initial step. Is that stereotype of men consistent with the experience that you've been having at the center since it's opened, or have you found something like the opposite, that men are more than willing to step up if they have the right place to do it?
I think it's a combination of both. The reason why men have tended not to step up is because of gender socialization, which sends signals constantly to men that it's important to not be vulnerable, it's important to take it like a man, it's important to be strong, and I think strength, can take many forms, but sometimes it takes the form where men think that being strong means that you be stoic and you keep quiet when in fact you're in trouble. And I think the opening of the center and the way we branded the center, it's carefully at breaking down the stigma that men often face in terms of getting help. The other thing we've done is we've been very open from the beginning to whoever walks through the door, whether it's a man or a woman, whether it's a gay person or a straight person, whoever's here to get help. And the reason why we think in particular it's so important to welcome women is that often women will come in looking for help from male loved ones before those men are ready to seek help. So we've actually had mothers and grandmothers looking to get help for their sons or grandsons. We have had wives looking for help for their husbands. And so whoever comes through that door, we will help them with equal enthusiasm because we know it will make families stronger, and that's really what we're all about. Our focus, and again, the branding that we've been very thoughtful with, I think, has made it easier for men to break through those stigmas.
And how? And I know I can't put you on the spot for a specific percentage, but if you had to just roughly guesstimate the percentage of women that come seeking help for men who may not be willing to come on their own, or may have fears about it or whatever, how many women are you reaching that are willing to walk in your door and say, I've got a son or a brother or my father or my brother-in-law who's in deep trouble. It's not his fault. He's really getting a shaft here. What can you do to help out? How many of those people are women coming in?
Easily a quarter. It's not half-half, but it's at least a quarter. And it's not just women who are seeking services for men. We've also had an overwhelming response from women who want to get involved as volunteers because they've seen the effect, domestic violence, or men who felt that they didn't have anywhere to go for their PTSD or their depression or their anxiety. Women who have witnessed all sorts of quote-unquote men's issues, who want to now do something, not just for the men in their life, but for other men, strangers, and they just want to give something back. So we have volunteers here who are men and women. One of our therapists is a woman, Eleanor Levine. She's a remarkable lady. She's been an advisor to CAFE for almost since we started, and when we opened the center, she was the first to sign up to provide free therapy for men. So we have really been doing this from the beginning, hand in hand with women allies and allies in the gay and lesbian community. We have a great mix in terms of people's racial and ethnic backgrounds. It's a really diverse group, and I think that's made us stronger and more successful.
Excellent. And if I can, I want to add just a little bit of commentary to what you just said, personal opinion. We encounter sometimes throughout the men's movement, not just at AVFM, but in many different places, somewhat of an aversion to the idea of women being involved in men's advocacy or activism. I think if there's ever proof positive of why it's so important to appeal to the consciousness of women and to include them in this, what Justin just said, a quarter of the women are coming. These are guys that may have never walked in the door. These are guys that may have just suffered with their problems alone. As we all know, there's 8 men a day in Canada commit suicide. There's 4 times that many in the United States. And somebody needs to walk in the door and ask for help for these people. I think it was a very smart move on your part to shape your branding and your marketing so that women feel comfortable walking in that door, knowing that they're going to try to get some sort of help for the men in their lives. Good job on that one.
I appreciate you saying that, and I just want to maybe build on the comment I just made in terms of reaching out and welcoming whoever comes through the door. It's not just individuals that we've been working with, and who have represented the diversity of our community. We've also started making alliances with other community organizations, and I'm really pleased to announce that we are putting in place the first conference, at least the first conference in about a decade, focused on male survivors of trauma and abuse and violence. And we will be doing this in Toronto in October of this year, along with some very well-established organizations like the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness, which is run by women, which is geared overwhelmingly at female victims, but which has been certainly open to expanding their programs to welcome and encourage into their programs male victims, complements to that we've been able to build. And I think we in this movement, or at CAFE specifically, can't do everything, and there's a lot of gaps in our programs. But what we can do is we can catalyze some fundamental changes, which will then encourage other established agencies to expand their programs to get more men the help that they need.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the politics of that. I'm curious. I know that we still have, if we look at right now on our front page at AVFM, we have an article written by Dr. Tanvir Ahmed, who was the white ribbon spokesman from Australia, who was basically lynched because he wrote an article that expressed concern and compassion for male victims and concerns that he did not want them looked over. His treatment following that was abhorrent. We know that there's still a lot of questions about funding. There are concerns, I think, in some agencies who provide female-only services that perhaps the emergence of services for men will somehow end up cutting into their funding. I don't buy that as an argument. I think that we can treat everybody, or we can try to reach out to everybody without shorting the other end. I don't think that if we help a man, it means that a woman is going to go without services. But there seems to be some of that mentality out there still, so a great amount of hostility. Do you see that lessening? You talked about now you've established some sort of relationship with an agency that is run almost primarily by women, and they're focused on providing services to women, but that they were actually open to expanding some sort of relationship with you in the future. Do you see that as a sign that that hostility is beginning to change, or do you see that we're still going to have a lot of roadblocks ahead?
You know, in a sense, you have to follow the money. What I learned from a couple of these agencies, like the Center for Abuse Awareness, because they are frontline workers who work directly with survivors of victimization, is they know very well that these men are out there, right? Nobody has to show them statistics for them to know that men are also victims, because men, having nowhere else to go, will actually contact these organizations, even though they're branded for women, and ask them for help. And so we get very courageous leaders of these organizations who want to expand their programs, who are very happy, in fact, that our center has opened, because now there's a place they can refer these men. But when I say follow the money, here's the problem. Their donors have really tied their hands behind their back, because their donors, who tend to be, well-established corporate backers, are highly conservative in the sense of being very cautious, very risk-averse, and they don't want to be funding organizations or programs which are seen as supporting men, quite frankly, right? So when they provide the funding, it comes with an expectation that it will go towards women and children, and so these organizations, when they accept that money, they're almost making a deal with the devil, right? Because sure, they want to provide services to those who need it. It's better to help women than help nobody. But then it kind of reinforces this attitude that it's okay to set up gender-exclusive programs. And I'm glad to see some of these organizations trying, even in this very difficult tightrope, that they have to walk, to do their best to provide support to women as well as to men. But I think it really has to do with where the money is coming from. And it's not just corporate backers. Of course, governments are very sensitive to the PR implications of being seen to support men's programs. So they're also very difficult to get grants from in terms of expanding their supported by that money.
Without snooping into your bottom line or your sources, can you give us just a general idea for the center that you now run for the Billboard campaign? How are you managing to acquire the funds for that? Because it's not cheap. I mean, you guys have obviously invested a lot, and you have future plans to invest more. And again, I'm not looking for individual donors' names or anything like that, but just sort of a general sense of how you're making this model work, because it seems to be something that a lot of us could be paying attention to.
Well, our approach has been to show proof of concept, in the expectation that once we have established ourselves as a reputable organization with a track record of helping people, then it will be easier to finally break in and get some of the corporate funding, even the government funding, the philanthropic foundation funding, etc. But that given the novelty of what we're doing, it's much more difficult to get those sources of funds without any kind of proof of concept. So in order to do that, of course, you need some capital, to
Yeah.
get the door open. So it's all been private donations so far. It's been members, it's been individual donors, it's been communities like AVFM rallying its supporters to support a worthy cause. I mean, your group has done a tremendous job, and there have been a few others who have likewise done what they can to support this initiative. But if this is to be sustainable long term, frankly, we will have to find a way to break into these other markets, diversify our funding base, government funds, corporate grants, etc. And we're now, making forays in those directions. But that'll be the real test, is if we can establish the credibility, and with that credibility, I think more avenues of funding will open to us. Now, as to the Billboard campaign, putting up a single billboard for 1 month, which is all it takes really to get the kind of attention that we've managed to get to spark this conversation. It's then what I think a lot of people think it might be, and so this is something that I think is eminent fact. We're going to be putting up more billboards in Toronto. We're going to be putting up billboards in other cities. We have a very, very generous donor who's been supporting us for years, who is backing us in terms of the Toronto Billboard campaign, but other people have stepped up since, wanting to see similar advertisements in other parts of Canada. So if there are viewers who want to see billboards or bus ads or other kinds of advertisements up in their community, it is very much doable. Our organization is happy to work with these individuals to bring these kinds of conversations into other places.
Let me use that as just the perfect excuse to ask you, where do people go to donate to this campaign for the billboards? Where do they go to give you money?
Well, I was hoping you'd ask that. Well, they can go to our website, which is equalitycanada.com, and then /donations will get you directly to the donate page. We also have a campaign page, which has all of the information on the billboard. You got the photo of the billboard. You've got a downloadable, concise document that you can sort of hand out to your friends and colleagues. They give you sort of talking points on the campaign. They respond to myths and misconceptions, and that's also available at our website, equalitycanada.com.
Okay, I'll find that page. Usually it takes anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes for these Hangout interviews to process before they're editable online, but as soon as that's available, folks, look in the low bar to this video and you will find a direct link. And I know that I can say, I don't need Justin's approval to say this, no amount of money is too small. If you've got $5 and that's what you've got, please donate it to them. $10, $100, whatever it is. This is the kind of campaign that does begin to change the dialogue across the whole culture. People are not used to seeing billboards like this that are telling them the truth. They're used to seeing whatever pulls on their heartstrings. And it's not that I'm minimizing the pain of women who are abuse victims. It's a horrible thing, but we do have to accept the reality that if I put up a picture of a woman with a black eye and maybe some blood on her face versus a man who has the same thing, the human instinct is to put all the compassion into the female. It's a very natural part of humanity. What Cafe is trying to do here is a very, very tough job. It's expensive. So again, I will have a link to your donation page in the low bar, and I hope that people, I'll even go so far as to say there's a lot of people out there that care about messages that just can't stand AVFM. We know that, we're fine with it. We're good with doing what we do. If you don't want to give us money, go to Cafe and give them money for what they're doing, because if you don't like us, they're probably doing things a lot more along your style. They're getting into service provision. They're getting into public awareness on a level that's never been even attempted before. And it looks like they're doing a damn good job. So I would suggest going there and supporting their work. And we will be doing more of this on the front pages of AVFM in the future as this campaign develops and they attempt to move into other cities with more billboards. We're switching our funding model entirely at AVFM, being less reliant on quarterly fundraisers and more reliant on memberships and other forms of donations. So that is also, it's going to have a twofold effect. One, it's going to quit burdening so many people with so little money to make things happening. happen so much, but it will also provide an opportunity for us to use AVFM to be much more assertive about pointing to programs like what Justin and Cafe are doing and asking people to throw their money at that. This is important work. I didn't want to let that go without saying you guys are doing a great job, and I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you,
Paul. So about the future. You have campaigns of billboards in mind, and those will create shockwaves, and they'll also, quite honestly, do what they're intended to do, which maybe some guy driving by seeing that who's in an abusive relationship and thought he had nowhere to go whatsoever will see for the first time, hey, there's somewhere to go. Maybe some woman that loves a guy that is going through this will see that billboard and decide that there is a place for him to go, that he actually can get help, which he's not going to get by calling police in most cases, and not so much from attorneys that and such that are not aware of these issues. Do you have other plans other than the billboards, the things you want to do to get this word out and start changing the dialogue more?
Right. So every month for the next few months, we're going to have different themes. This month is obviously about violence against men, in particular domestic violence. And the Billboard is the sort of the flagship initiative within that theme. But we will also be running a series of radio ads, which will also, I think, turn some heads. They will be run on some pretty major Toronto radio stations during the month of March. We are actually in the process of putting together a recording of a more detailed version of that radio ad, which will go up on our website. And it's an interesting scenario. It's premised on a very common sort of trope for commercials and advertisements on domestic violence, which involve police responding to a call regarding a domestic disturbance. But in this case, the police arrive, they immediately assume that the man is the perpetrator, they're about to remove him from the house, when it turns out the tables are sort of turned on them, and lo and behold, it's the woman who's the perpetrator, but the man, they don't know where to bring him because there's no resources or shelters for him. So that ad will go up on the radio within a week or two, and then we will have a longer, more complete version of that on our website. And then we're going to move in the coming months onto other themes. The theme in April will be parental alienation. Parental Alienation Day is April 25th, so we will be celebrating that in various cities in Canada. We will have our next Billboard ad focused on that. I don't want to give away exactly what the image will be just yet, but it's going to be a bit of a shocker. And then following that, we're going to be looking at men's mental health, and we will be focusing PTSD, anxiety, suicide, specifically as they relate to men. And again, you can be sure that the imagery and the marketing around that will be raising some eyebrows. But we don't just do this just to be provocative. I mean, the statistic and the story in and of itself, and I think just putting them out there definitely gets people intrigued without having to be without having to go overboard, right, or be gratuitous in the way in which we frame it. But it's interesting that people find just the mere fact that there are male victims, just the fact that half the victims are men, which is just taken verbatim from Statistics Canada's own surveys. That mere fact is seen as being too shocking to be up there on a billboard.
That is the world we live in, unfortunately. Well, listen, let me ask you, I've got a couple of closing thoughts I want to get to before we close out here, but is there anything about Cafe's current activities, this particular campaign, that I have not asked you about that maybe you would like to share with people?
I think we've had a pretty thorough coverage in our conversation about the domestic violence campaign. It's the billboard, it's the radio ad, it's also our website. We've generated quite a healthy conversation on our website, on our forum, as well as through our social media campaign. So if folks are looking for a very simple way to support what we're doing, obviously donating to bring the ad to your city would be tremendous. But an easy thing to do is just use our hashtag Let's Talk Men, which will be the same hashtag we use throughout the various billboard campaigns. And it's both to encourage men to talk about their issues, as well as to encourage the public in general to talk about men's issues. But hashtag Let's Talk Men, use it on Twitter, use to the forum on our website, and let's talk about men.
I already tweeted this interview using that hashtag, so we're going to do our part from the start here. It is going out to that hashtag along with a few others. Let me sort of close this up with a couple of maybe a little bit of a personal observation, not about Justin, but I get questions from time to time. You know, in the age of the internet, the differences that people have with each other are often public knowledge. I mean, you just can't get away with it. If there's disputes, if there's differences between agencies, between organizations, that gets talked about. Sometimes it gets played up to be more than it's worth. Most of you who follow AVFM regularly, or I suppose Cafe regularly, will know that there has been a couple of moments that were somewhat frictional between the two organizations. I don't even want to call it frictional, but maybe somewhat critical. We both have different ways of doing things, but I will call your attention to the fact that I am sitting here right now having a nice, wonderful conversation with Justin Trottier of Cafe, who is doing incredible work. Any differences that we have with any organizations, we just consider a matter of routine. This stuff happens these days, and there's no hiding it. But if anybody has any concerns about it, which I doubt many do, but I'm going to say it anyway, from my position here at AVFM, Cafe has probably done the most incredible organized work on behalf of men and boys that's ever happened in Western culture. I compare them somewhat to what's going on in India, where the men's activists there are very organized and are working and doing things that, I mean, the Americans are somehow going to have to catch up to these people, because when it comes to organization, when it comes to putting things together, to getting people's feet on the ground, to making things happen, to providing services, it's these guys in Canada and these guys in India. And now we're starting to see in some other places that are really making that happen. So whatever differences that we've had with style or delivery or anything else with Cafe, I hope everybody realizes that that is just a philosophical debate. It has nothing to do with the value or worth of Cafe services. So I'm going to say it one more time, folks. Give these people some money, please. Give them some money. That billboard rocked the world across Canada. One single billboard had eyebrows raised everywhere. It was covered everywhere in the National Post, and I don't know how many other blogs I saw it on. With people's reaction to it, but the bottom line is what Justin said. The bottom line is, the important thing is not whether or not there's a bunch of ideologues that are worried about their funding that are going to raise and screech and say Cafe is a bunch of misogynists that wants to take money away from women's services. They're going to say stuff like that. The important thing here is what he just reported, that there are men and women walking in the doors to the Canadian Center for Men and Families, asking for help. That was the whole point to begin with, was to start reaching these disaffected populations, rendering service to them, trying to make their lives better, trying to cut in maybe a little bit to that 8 men a day who take their lives because they can't stand it. And again, gay, straight, black, white, religious, non-religious. I have watched Cafe long enough to know they don't care. If you're a guy with problems and you need help, they'll try to do something, or they will try to get you to somebody who can help you. That's an absolute guarantee. Their work should be supported without reservation by anybody interested in issues that affect men and boys. And sorry, that's my soapbox for the day, Justin.
Well, let me just say, Paul, I'm humbled by your kind words. They're very much appreciated. It's certainly all water under the bridge. In fact, I think different styles and different approaches make the overall movement stronger. This is all about experimenting and sort of seeing what works, and different things work in different communities. Certainly in Canada and India, you know, different approaches are going to work in those two very different parts of the world. But I just want to make one point, which is, you know, we're not going to rest on our laurels. We've got lots of other things planned, and I would encourage other groups or other communities, either working with us or inspired by the Billboard. It doesn't actually take that much money or that much, you know, that many resources to put up a billboard or put up a bus ad or start a social marketing campaign or find some other way to get the word out. So we like healthy competition. We'd like to work with communities, but we're also fine if other organizations, you know, model their own projects on what we're doing. But, you know, put a billboard up in your city. pick a topic that you think is important, having to do with the health and welfare of boys and men, and see what you can do. And let's get this thing moving beyond the confines of Toronto.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, you've just planted a really good idea in my mind. We have a course upcoming in October. At the end of October this year, we're having our second international conference on men's issues in Houston. Maybe a month or so before that conference would be a great time to put a billboard up about men's issues in one form or another, because it will, I mean, this is a different political environment in Houston than it is in Toronto by far. It's almost like two different worlds, but you will still see a lot of the same reaction to just stating the fact that there are hurting men out there that need help and they're being ignored. And putting that message up will raise eyebrows. So we may end up taking a little bit of Cafe's playbook here and doing it ourselves. And I'd certainly recommend it to anybody else. And with that, I think we've about covered everything, Justin. Again, unless you feel like there's something that I've missed.
No, I think we've hit all the right notes.
Excellent. Well, it's as always a pleasure talking to you. Huge fan of Cafe and your work here. And let's get together and do this again, if you please. When you guys get into the mode of going into multiple cities, would you be willing to come back and sit down with me again and chat about that and let everybody know how it's going?
It would be a pleasure. I look forward to it.
Wonderful. With that, I will tell everybody, look in the low bar in a few minutes. You will find a place where you can give a donation to Cafe, and you should. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.